intonation, the hidden language that speaks louder than words.
And what's really fascinating is that our brains are processing these vocal cues before we even understand the words themselves.
Wait, really? Before the words?
Absolutely. According to recent neuroscience research, our amygdala, the brain's emotional sentinel, activates within milliseconds of hearing someone's tone. It's like having an emotional early warning system.
That's incredible. So our brains are basically doing a quick emotional scan before we even process what someone's saying?
Exactly. And here's what's even more interesting. Research from Yale shows that tone accounts for about 38% of message interpretation in face-to-face communications, while words alone only contribute 7%.
Only 7%? That's way lower than I would have guessed.
Right? And you know what's funny? It reminds me of that scene in Austin Powers where Dr. Evil demands $1 million as ransom.
Oh yeah, where his tone makes it sound ridiculous because it's such a small amount by modern standards?
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how tone can completely change the meaning of words. The same phrase can sound threatening or comical just based on how it's delivered.
Let's talk about pitch specifically. What does research tell us about how voice pitch affects perception?
Well, this is fascinating. Recent studies have found that people actually attribute more emotional capacity to speakers with higher pitched voices.
More emotional capacity? What exactly does that mean?
It means listeners tend to believe that higher pitched speakers are more capable of experiencing emotions and physical sensations. They're perceived as more emotionally aware.
That's really interesting. Does this affect how we treat people in real-world situations?
Actually, yes. Studies show that when victims speak with higher pitch, people tend to judge their harm as more severe and recommend stronger treatment or punishment for wrongdoers.
Wow, so this could have real implications in legal or medical settings?
Absolutely. Think about how this might affect jury decisions or medical professionals assessing pain levels.
That's kind of concerning, isn't it? That something like pitch could influence such important decisions?
It is, and it highlights why understanding these effects is so crucial. But let's talk about intonation patterns. They're equally fascinating.
What exactly do you mean by intonation patterns?
Well, there are three main types: rising, falling, and rising, falling. Each serves a different communicative purpose.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure. Rising intonation is typically used for yes-no questions or to express surprise, like when I say, really, with an upward pitch at the end.
Ah, I can hear that difference.
Falling intonation, on the other hand, signals completion or certainty. It's what we use for statements and commands.
And what about rising falling?
That's often used for lists or choices, like when you're saying, would you like coffee, tea, or juice? Notice how the pitch rises and falls?
Let's talk about trust. How does tone affect whether we trust someone?
Research shows that people form judgments about trustworthiness within milliseconds, and tone heavily influences these snap decisions.
Milliseconds? That's incredibly fast.
Yes, and a calm, steady voice typically signals confidence and control, while warmth and varied pitch signal empathy and approachability.
So what happens when there's a mismatch between words and tone?
That's when things get really interesting. If someone says, I'm fine, but their tone is tense or flat, we'll usually trust the tone over the words.
I think we've all experienced that moment of disconnect.
And it's because our brains are wired to prioritize these nonverbal cues. They're harder to fake than words.
What about cultural differences? Does tone mean the same thing across different cultures?
That's a crucial point. While some aspects of vocal emotion are universal, the interpretation of certain tones can vary significantly across cultures.
Can you give us an example?
Well, in some cultures, a rising tone at the end of statements is common and neutral, while in others it might be interpreted as uncertainty or questioning.
That could lead to some interesting misunderstandings.
Absolutely. And it's why being aware of these differences is so important in our increasingly global world.
Let's talk about mood. How does our emotional state affect our tone?
Research shows that our emotional state is reflected in our vocal patterns, even when we try to hide it.
So it's pretty hard to fake?
Exactly. Our vocal cords are actually connected to our emotional system through the vagus nerve, so our true feelings often leak into our voice.
That's fascinating. What about in professional settings?
Well, studies show that teachers and professors who develop voice problems, like hoarseness, can actually affect their students' memory and comprehension.
Really? Just from hoarseness?
Yes, because listeners have to work harder to process the information, which can affect their ability to retain it.
So, what can people do to improve their vocal communication?
The first step is becoming more aware of your own vocal patterns and how they affect others.
Any specific techniques?
Practice varying your pitch and pace, and pay attention to how your emotional state affects your voice. Recording yourself can be really helpful.
That makes sense. What about listening skills?
Yes, developing better awareness of others' vocal cues is equally important. Try focusing on tone separately from words sometimes.
Like watching a foreign film without subtitles?
Exactly. That's actually a great exercise for developing tone sensitivity.
As we wrap up, what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember about tone and communication?
That your tone is constantly sending messages, whether you intend to or not. It's like a continuous broadcast of your emotional state.
And people are picking up on it even before they process our words.
Exactly. Being mindful of this can dramatically improve how effectively we connect with others.
Well, this has been incredibly enlightening. Your tone is telling a story all its own.